Well, if you turn as far as defense, and then we see Elihu come on the scene. These three men quit answering Job because he was righteous, and answered Job, he became angry. So Elihu, the son of Arachel, the Buzite, replied, I am young in years, while you are old. Therefore, words, I paid close attention to you, yet no one proved Job wrong. Not one of you refuted his arguments, so do not claim we have found wisdom. Let God deal with him. My heart is like unvented wine that's about to burst like new wineskins. I must speak so that I can find relief. I must open my lips and respond. I'll major character whose name is Job. Job was a man who was perfect and upright, a man who feared God, a man who hated that which is evil, and that who is an intriguing and remarkable man. It's very difficult to know exactly how to that opinion. You know, there are people, the minute you meet them, you think in your mind, I'm going to like that person. I don't know if I'm going to like them or not, but I'm going to give them some time. And that's where Elihu fits. I don't know whether there's no word of commendation from God for Elihu either. It's almost as though God just kind of seems to ignore him. But Elihu's speech in the book of Job, and he does some good things. He rebukes Job's three friends. He has a very strong defense for the character of God in this speech. Even admire him or reject him, that's who he is. And so we're going to spend several Sunday evenings with this man. But tonight, I just want us to think about him as Job and his three so-called friends. Everybody knew them. Everybody knew about Job. Everybody knew Eliphaz. Everybody knew Bildad. Everybody knew Zophar. They were well known. If it's a prayer, it is God bless me. Bless, oh God. And so if you translate it that way, God bless me. If you translate it as it being a person. And so here's this man, Barakel. He asks God to bless him. God gives him a son. He names his son Jehovah is his God. And now he also says that he is from the family of Ram. And so we know something about his family clan, his family group. And so we have this lengthy introduction about this man because of their age. Elihu was a young man. And as Job and these three friends have been going at it, the crowds have began to gather around listening, and they listen. Verse 40, the last chapter, the last sentence, the words of Job are ended. And then in chapter 32, verse 1, so these three men quit answering Job, or they quit talking book in the Bible. And that was a good law then, and it's still a good rule today. Young people respect your wisdom, but in them he found no wisdom, and he found no reason to wait any longer. And so he speaks up, and he begins his angry with Job because he believes that Job has been more concerned about his reputation than God's reputation. He's angry with these three, that age should speak and maturity should teach wisdom. Elihu said, I listened and I listened and I listened. I didn't hear anything. Now verse 8, he said, it's over. And now the Holy Spirit of God, he testifies, the Holy Spirit of God has breathed on him, and he begins to speak. And he said that I can find relief. And he says, man, God has put something in my mouth. I'm about to explode. I've waited for you to finish. He speaks. Why does he even speak at all? Well, he does not speak to take sides. Verse 12, he says, I paid close attention to you to offer some kind of foolish flattery. Verse 21, he says, I will be partial to no one. I will not give anyone an undeserved title, for I do know. Verse 6, the last word, no. Verse 10, the last word, no. Verse 17, the last word, no. What Elihu is doing, Elihu says, I've not come to spirit-filled men ought to be heard. And spirit-filled men have a right to be heard. Let me say this to you. Every person who claims to be filled with the Holy Spirit. You see, we live in a world of many voices. You turn on the TV, opinions and what they think. But we have voices, all these voices that we hear. Used to, you might remember, radio's easy to tell apart. And it's not because heaven talks like hell, it's because hell tries to talk like heaven. Do not believe every spirit. Now, in the New Testament, you will find other spirits that are identified with the Holy Spirit. Spirits, they're everywhere, and they are speaking. They're all verbal. And so sometimes we have to pause. John said, you don't test them to see who promises more stuff. You test them to see whether they are of God, because many spirits. What is the test? Well, John goes on, verse 2. This is how you know the Spirit of God. If you know His voice, you don't pay a lot of attention to somebody who just wants to tell you that Jesus was a good man. Don't pay any attention to somebody that wants to tell you the hallucination. He was not an apparition. Jesus Christ came in the flesh as God. Verse 3 says He loved everybody. You know, every one of those things is true. But listen, those things don't mean anything that they were God incarnate. You must say more about Jesus than you say about the best of men. And they're claiming to have this supernatural, spirit-inspired power. You have to test them. And to be quite honest, you'll give them a test and you'll ask of God, who gives it to you liberally. And so we need to understand, man was there. Nobody knew him. Nobody knew anything about him. He was just a young man. And there may be some times when we have children of God to learn how to test the spirits. Now, there are some you can listen to, and it can be obvious pretty quick, because people who will never say that Jesus is God come in the flesh. They won't do it. Matter of fact, that's one of pagans and heathens, though I suspect it's pretty obvious for some of them. But the message is, test the Spirit. You and me as His children to follow the finger of fickle fate. God doesn't want us to be blown about by every wind of false doctrine. He wants us to be for the opportunity to come tonight.